It's Bigfoot Collectors Club with Bryce, Michael, and Ivy. I know a story of high strangeness or two. Let's do this.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bigfoot Collectors Club, the show where we talk to amazing guests about their personal paranormal history, not this week, and share stories of high strangeness. I'm your host, Michael McMillan. With me always is your other host.
What's up, Club Scouts? Bryce Johnson here.
And our super producer,
Riley Bray.
Riley, you look like you're like chilling crisscross applesauce style, like in your friends' like basement, like after a show, like after doing like a theater production, and you guys are all getting around, hanging around, eating Doritos, and thinking about who you're gonna kiss.
That's pretty accurate, actually. That's pretty much exactly what's going on right now. So yeah.
I just see like a couch and a TV behind you, like over your shoulders. You just look like you're a real. I'll say this: you're bringing real Slumber Boy special energy.
I'm not somebody's parents' house, just like
the old Slumber Boy special.
Sneaking beer from the fridge in the garage.
Oh
yeah.
My god!
One time,
so good.
I remember I had just gotten home for spring break. This is when I was like away at boarding school, and I came home. And I was hanging out with my friends, and we snuck a bunch of booze down into his basement. His mom was home, but she went to bed early, and we all spent the night. And I remember drinking so much vodka, and I was getting over mono, and I drank so much vodka. And then was like double fisting cigarettes in the backyard. Stayed up with everybody until like 4 a.m.
My dream.
Went to bed, woke up at like 6, puked just pure bile, just puked like pure. Sorry, everybody.
Welcome to Bigfoot Collectors Club.
I gotta tell you what, we're gonna get into weird liquids in this story today, so you might as well get used to it.
Might as well start with Michael's.
Yeah, warm them up.
And then I remember looking in the mirror, just being like, looking like I was on death's door. I was like yellow. I was like, wait, why did I drink all this on mono? And then I drove home that morning, and my mom took one look at me, and she's like, what happened to you? And I was like, I don't know. I feel like I got sick again. And then I went and lay down in bed, and I could hear my mom asking my sister, like, how old is Micah? Is he old enough to get like? She was like, I was totally like busted, but thankfully I lived in a family that didn't want to ask tough questions, and
there you go.
I just slept it off that day.
Let me ask you guys. I was in a family that, and my wife and I complain about this. Neither of our folks ever once mentioned they never had a fucking sex talk, a booze talk, a drug talk. So I ended up doing all fucking three. It was like, a little warning would have been nice,
Wait, you told your parents about sex, drugs, and everything else?
No. Looking back, like they never once had like a preamble warning of like, hey, watch out for booze, or watch out for drugs, or watch out for women.
No. All those women, they'll come and get you.
Well, my dad told me to watch out for women, that's for sure. But no, they never.
That's because he was bitterly divorced.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah. No, I think we all had a similar upbringing there, where they just booze, drugs, and women, Michael.
Yeah. That is the advice you would get from your divorced father who lived in Reno. That is exactly.
God.
No, but that's what you're saying. He didn't get it. He needed.
I didn't get the birds and the bees. I didn't get the watch out for the weed and the booze. I didn't get any of that good parental advice. And we're gonna dole it out to our kids. It's coming early, man. Yeah, it's gonna be like, hey, watch out.
Shit is coming. It's going to get weird fast.
Yeah, it's going to get weird fast.
Again, this all will sort of pertain to today's episode. I remember I asked my mom where babies come from, and when she responded with, where do you think babies come from? And I said, well, I think I think that when a woman is ready to have a baby, then two little aliens fly down. I remember going specifically.
You said aliens?
It said two little aliens fly down and they put a baby in the mom's stomach. And then I heard my sister laughing because she was spying on the conversation on the other side of the door.
That does relate to tonight's story. Holy cow.
Yes.
It certainly does.
You were destined to have a paranormal podcast by that story.
I can still... I didn't know if I really believed it. I was just trying to answer her creatively, just to break the ice. You know what I mean? Kind of what we're doing right now before we get into the serious stuff. But yeah, I remember my sister laughing and running away from the door. And then my mom told me about sex and I was disgusted. Because she made it sound very clinical and didn't know it was supposed to be fun until I watched an episode of Moonlighting and my dad got mad and made me and my sister turn it off when two people were having sex in the cold open. And I was like, why are those hot people trying to have a baby? They don't seem like they're married.
I think I learned about sex from this. It was this next door neighbor in Reno, and he had like a Playboy, and the pages were torn and placed in a Trapper Keeper binder with like the laminated page sleeves. And he would turn them over like they were baseball cards. Easy. And I was like, I was like, oh my God, what is this? Anyway.
Wow.
And then he ate a stink bug. So what a fucking guy. Yeah.
What a ledge.
Well, total ledge. Total legend.
Was this the kid who lived next door to Buzz and Woody in Toy Story?
Yeah, very similar indeed. But anyway.
All right. Well, boys, girls, non-binary friends, we are headed back into a deep dive discussion. I'll tell you what, I have been consuming nonstop alien gray matter for the past 3 or 4 weeks now, and it really didn't help that we did that episode of Adela Levine's podcast where she basically told me that the Greys were my Pennywise, that they've been following me my whole life. Because we're talking about the abduction of Betty Andreasson, and during researching this, there were multiple times I was reading the book, writing stuff, doing research, and then just like, I bet you $10 if I just look to my left or look to my right, there's going to be an alien gray standing there. Like, I was ready. I've been ready for these fuckers to pop up in my life again. Thankfully, they have not. And again, they are not. I do not give consent. They are not invited. So I will say it now. And I will say it.
You've been very clear about that.
Yes, to our alien gray audience. Yeah.
They're not allowed to peek in my windows. They're not allowed to put a hand on my shoulder casually as I'm flipping through a 400-page book on an alien abduction. It's not happening.
That's what you think.
So I just want to remind everybody, or I should give you a heads up, if you're new to this podcast and you've listened to these 7 minutes and haven't turned it off already, we would suggest you go back and listen to last week's episode, then come back and listen to this, because this is part 2 of the abduction of Betty Andreasson. I want to remind everybody that the primary source for this week's story is the Andreasson Affair by Raymond E. Fowler. You can get it on Amazon.com or go to your local bookstore and order it. I would recommend doing so if you want to learn more about the case. All right, you boys ready to now Riley? Sorry, Bryce, go ahead.
And I was going to say, speaking of the case, there's really not that many abduction cases where the actual people have gone public and written and authorized books about their experiences. So this one is legend,
Yeah, good point. And like we mentioned last week, it is noted for its high content of high strangeness, all of which we're really going to get to in the body of this episode. And because so much was mined, no pun intended, from the hypnosis regression sessions of Betty and also her daughter Becky, but mostly Betty. And so the story that we're telling in these 2 episodes is really the linear narrative of the stuff that came out during these hypnosis regression sessions. And again, this was all back in the late 60s. Well, it happened in 1967. And then the regression sessions didn't happen until 10 years later.
Yeah.
And when you're reading this stuff and you're researching this, what happens is, because they'll revisit the same stuff over the course of a few hypnosis sessions. So like the first time they walk through something, Betty might give a little bit of detail, and then they'll go back, they'd go back like a couple days later and dig a little deeper and dig a little deeper. So sometimes when you're reading these stories and these books and these sessions, like it kind of loops around on itself, and you're like, oh, this little bit of information she had the first time around, she's got more detail the deeper they dig, right? So it's a really interesting way to, especially because the book is mostly transcripts of those sessions, if you're curious what those might be like or how they were conducted in the 70s during like prime ufology, the whole you go get regressed. Like this is prime era of that. So it's also just fun to read as a transcription. All right, so let's get into it. This is Betty Andreasson, Part 2. When we last left Betty Andreasson, she had just been taken aboard an alien craft that landed or appeared on the hillside of her backyard of her Massachusetts home in January of 1967. Her captors, 3 alien greys, led by a slightly taller gray calling himself Quasga, had just led the mother of 7 into a bright, dome-shaped examination room. So, Betty had just changed into her puffy white garment she found floating in a small changing room, taken to the examination room where Quasga had just entered. Remember, at this point in her experience, Betty's movement is restricted, which is odd because if the beings were controlling her actions, I'm not sure why they needed to prompt her into changing out of her clothes and into a medical gown. I'm really not sure what the rules are or where these interdimensional kidnappers drew the line on consent. It's very strange.
Quasga's rules. Quasga.
Yeah, they have no problem breaking and entering, freezing her children and family in suspended animation, controlling her body to get on a ship. But the moment they're like, "Can you change into this?" They like give her privacy.
Look, they have standards.
I guess that's what it is. At any rate, Betty's fears began to rise as she was floated up onto a rectangular block. Now, Betty recounted all of these events under hypnosis regression, and during this part of the story, Raymond E. Fowler, the author of The Andreasson Affair, noted that this part was, quote, one of the most emotional-packed portions of the case. So digging into the examination and what came next, this was like 3 or 4 sessions they went back to, and it constantly left Betty exhausted. But in the moment, as she relived it, Betty was surrounded by a small number of alien entities, and she thinks they're the same group. There weren't like new alien doctors. This all seemed to be conducted by the same 4 alien greys. But here in the exam room, they were dressed in silver jumpsuits, and their skin glowed white, much lighter than the grayish clay-like skin that she had noted earlier, possibly, she thought, due to the bright white light that seemed to come from everywhere as opposed to just one source. So this whole dome is just lit up like an Apple commercial from the early 2000s.
Yeah,
perfect analogy. Yes, I get exactly what you're saying there.
So Betty turns to Quasga, or looks over to him in her restricted movement, and says, "What are you going to do, Quasga?"
"Just measure you for the light."
"That's what you're going to do? Measure me for light?"
"We're going to measure you for light."
Quasga pulled out a small wand with a head that looked like a tulip blossom at the tip and waved it over Betty's body, saying,
"You have not understood the word that you have. You've misunderstood some places. There are spots there from it. You are not completely filled with light."
Okay, so this is like how these guys are talking to Betty during this whole thing. They're kind of they're vague. It sounds like they're saying something, but when you start to unpack it, they're kind of not saying anything.
Totally.
Sort of like
that's
half
word
of my
soup right there.
My opinions on this podcast.
This sounds like a hippie from Topanga Canyon, just like chatting me up.
Yeah, and they're very cyclical in the way that they speak. Like, she'll ask a question and be like, because we need to. And she's like, but why? Because we need to do it. You know, it's that sort of parental because I told you so stuff without getting any real answers here.
Yeah.
So wire needles emerged from the walls. They were long needles attached to bendy, like Dr. Octopus, like thin Dr. Octopus arms. And one of the Greys inserted a long needle up Betty's left nostril and into her head, where she felt a slight pop as it punctured tissue or a membrane deep within. The sensation was obviously very painful. It hurt, but then Kwasga waved his hand over Betty's forehead and the pain suddenly vanished. According to Betty, her captors told her that they were awakening something within her. Throughout the process, Betty kept asking why she had to undergo this exam, and the beings would relate that the procedure was important, but never fully explained why. With the needle still inserted up her nose, one of the beings approached and unscrolled a long roll of tan, mesh-like paper about the size and width of a toilet paper roll. It and another Grey looked over the web-like parchment as a doctor might look over a patient's medical records. And after a quick review, they pulled the needle out of her nose, and Betty was startled to see a small implant on the tip of the needle, a tiny ball with spikes on it.
What?
So they were taking something out of her nose, not putting something in.
That was the
like
question.
She was already a tagged being, maybe, you know?
That's what it seems to imply. And Fowler and the investigators, Edelstein, they were all like, do you remember them? Was that thing on there when they put the needle up your nose? She was like, it definitely was not. I don't know what it is, but it pulled something out of my nose.
God, so weird.
Yeah.
The aliens stepped away to deliberate and then returned and told Betty that they needed to measure her for procreation.
Uh-oh.
Another long, bendy needle was inserted into Betty's navel. They stated that Betty was missing something. Betty figured they must have been referring to her hysterectomy, which Betty had undergone after their youngest daughter, Cindy's birth. Cindy was the 3-year-old.
Jeez, so
And
strange.
They were like, she says in this part, she's like, I can really, and I'm sorry, everybody, this is cringy. She's like, I can really feel them digging around down there. Like this needle was like through her navel, and she was like, they are looking around.
So this is like a 90s X-Files, like alien human hybrid situation? That's what we're talking?
Well, as you'll see, as the story goes, we never really get there. But they did seem to be alarmed that her uterus was gone. You know what I mean? And so obviously, I'm going to say, this is just me inserting speculation here. This doesn't come from the book. That would say to me that it's been at least, if she has been abducted before, and there is some... There are some hints that she might have been abducted on and on her whole life at the end of the book, which we're honestly not going to get too much into in this episode because I really just wanted to focus on this story of this particular event. That would imply that they hadn't at least taken her since her last child was born, because I guess after Cindy was born, there were complications and she had to have an emergency hysterectomy. So there you go.
Wow.
So strange, man.
So after the needle from her navel was removed, Betty noted that Kwasga seemed concerned. He told her they needed to run a few more tests. A large mechanical eye, or scope, made from plastic and glass descended from the ceiling and pressed against Betty's midsection. Now, this part she said it didn't hurt, and to me, this sounds like some type of X-ray or scan or ultrasound.
Yeah.
But it also reminds me of the Pascagoula alien abduction, where the 2 fishermen were brought into the football ship that looked like an old Nerf football. And they talked about a eye-shaped thing coming out of the wall and scanning them. excuse me, Calvin Parker, and I always forget the other guy's name, Bryce. I don't know if you can pull it out, but there was a similar thing in that case, and that I think was in 1969. So there's a precedent for this type of apparatus being involved in these alien abduction cases. After the eye mechanism, what was the other guy's name, Bryce?
Oh, sorry, I was.
I thought you were.
No, I'm just going through that some literature.
Something Harris, right? Calvin Parker.
Yeah, that sounds. I think there was Parker and Harris are the last names. Yep.
Yeah. Ray Parker Jr.
Here, I'll look it up. Hold on.
Yeah. Find out. Let me know. After the eye mechanism completed its unknown task, Kwasga waved his hands over Betty, a process which she described sending a wave of calmness flushing through her body. She was then levitated off the table by the beings and floated to a standing position at the opening of a doorway. Then she was taken back into the cleansing room where she was doused by light, which we talked about in the last episode, and back into her changing room where she was then instructed to put on her civilian clothes. I'm getting dressed and I put the garment down on the floor, and the garment seems to sort of stick somehow to the stuff there. Although it didn't feel sticky on me, but it seems like it sticks there. And I'm still getting dressed, and I'm wondering what they are going to put me through next. After putting her clothes back on, Betty knocked on the changing room door and told the beings she was ready to come out. The door whooshed open, and two grays hovered towards her, where they would proceed to take Betty on one of the strangest trips documented in the history of high strangeness.
Oh boy. All right.
Bryce, I see some pages turning there and some Googling happening. Do you have some names for me?
Yeah, so the Pascagoula abduction, that was in 1973, actually, and the gentleman involved was Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker.
There you go, Charles Hickson, and a few years later than I thought it was. Guys, I can't keep all this information in my head, okay? I'm trying to cram as much in here as possible as it is.
Listen, you're doing great, buddy. You just keep going.
All right,
fact checking in real time here. This is fantastic.
This is where I will say, smoke them if you got them, everybody. The beings took Betty and brought her back to the room where the lightning fork elevator tube had spat her out before the examination in last week's episode. A new doorway suddenly opened, and the Greys floated Betty into a long, dark tunnel that Betty described looking like a subway system. In this room, Betty noticed that they were floating along a black, plastic-appearing, moving track that ran beneath her feet that was about 9 inches wide. Not touching the track, but as Betty put it, skimming along the surface of it. Now, this track is going to be a main feature for the rest of the story. So I want everyone to picture this. It's like a miniature version of those people movers
at the airport. Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you're not standing on it. You're hovering over it. But she said that the sensation made her arms and her legs and sometimes her head felt very heavy and weighed down. She thought it was as a safety precaution so she wouldn't slide or fall off this thing. So I don't know if it's some sort of magnetism, if it's some sort of thing that it works in conjunction with the telekinesis of the aliens being able to move her around. But she talks about it throughout, and I'm bringing it up now.
And then on the speakers, it's like, remain seated, please. Keep your hands and arms inside the tract at all times.
Because this whole time, she'll break every few minutes in these sessions and talk about how heavy her neck might feel or her feet feel and how it's very uncomfortable.
Weird.
Yeah, really weird. So they're running along that track. And at this point, you might also be wondering, how big is this fucking ship, right? And Betty told her investigators under hypnosis that at this point, she felt as if she was no longer inside the craft. She was now someplace else. And I don't know when and where this ship took off and flew someplace else. I don't know when in any of this that happened, but now we seem to be entering another dimension. Either the ship went there and we can't account for the time that it went there, or the ship itself is a gateway to some sort of other dimension.
Yeah, I want to talk about that because that's sort of a perplexing phenomena about this UFO abduction thing. Is whenever these abductees enter the ship, what they think is this ship, it always seems to be much larger in space than what it appeared.
TARDIS rules.
From the exterior, and I've heard a couple theorists have some ideas about that, this layering dimension theory. In other words, so I'm holding this a chapstick, right? Mm-hmm. Now at the bottom of the chapstick, all you see is a 2-dimensional circle, right? This could represent the UFO. And once the occupant goes up in it, what they're doing is they're actually entering another dimension, which they can't see from our 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional plane. But once they enter that, so the ship is really just a gateway, an entrance point. And once they're inside this little, what looks like a flat circular thing, boom, it can expand into who knows the layering that can go on in that,
or the
space.
Structure or shape
or
of
the structure, sure.
If the UFO is just the tip dipping into the third dimension, once you walk in there, you might be in a
just
massive
dipping the tip. Yeah. Oh yeah,
guys, that's what aliens do. You know what I mean? They show us just
that's
the tip.
A Shadow Bat song.
It's
just dip the tip.
Yeah, and then you enter some sort of interdimensional time structure, through that. 3-dimensional thing.
I think so, man.
To the chapstick analogy, yeah.
Now get ready because it's going to get even weirder. So she's no longer inside the craft, and the eventually at the end of this long dark tunnel, she sees a light. And the passage on this little treadmill leads Betty and the Greys into a brightly lit, narrow room, cylindrical shaped. So much like that, if we hollowed out that chapstick tube you got there, Bryce, lined with what looked like translucent plastic chairs molded to the shape and size of human bodies. So think of the scenes. I know. Think of the scenes in like action movies where everyone's like gonna jump out of the plane and all the like mercenaries or like Navy SEALs are all shooting the shit and like teasing, teasing each other, and then they, they're all lined up against the wall of the bomber or whatever, and then they have to jump out of the ship. That's kind of what this room looks like. There's 4 chairs on each side facing each other with this tread going in between the chairs. And also the scary, and they have some sort of light or aperture hanging by an arm coming up the back of the chair and hanging over them, like a lamp, like a desk lamp, or, when I don't know if they still have, but like when my mom used to go get her perm, there was like a big thing that hung over the chair. So is this like an intergalactic waiting room or? Well, I don't, this might not even be, this might actually be like a limbo in between dimensions that prepares you for the next dimension. Okay. So I think it is actually kind of like a jump. I think this thing is going to be like a jump seat, and you'll see why. Also, I just want to note, and Betty noted it too, the implications that these chairs did seem to be built for humans and not aliens. Right. Yeah. It's designed for human interaction. So it's, they've done this before. Yeah. So the Greys led Betty to a seat that looked slightly different from the others. This, she realized, was because this one, unlike the others, had a form-molded cockpit hatch swung open, waiting to receive her. All the other seats had their hatches closed. Betty eyed the contraption nervously, and one of the beings sent her a telepathic message.
Will you please be seated?
What is this going to do?
Please be seated. We will not harm you.
Betty was placed in the seat, and the cover was lowered over her, sealing her off from the atmosphere of the room. So this is like, now she's like an action figure wrapped in plastic, okay? Wow. The beings then inserted 3 tubes that were hanging down from the ceiling into the head of the apparatus. She's got a tube going up one nostril, a tube going up the other nostril, and a tube, like a scuba tube, in her mouth. Okay,
I would not do well. I would not do well here. This is where a little panic for old Bryce Johnson might start to set in. And I might ask for a Vicodin or some type of
this is
the
the Finding Nemo submarines at Disneyland,
right?
This is 10 times worse. This is the claustrophobia level is at the max
through the roof.
And Betty is starting to freak out. I mean, what the fuck? They could be doing anything here, right?
Yeah.
So they put the tubes, they're like, close your eyes, do not open your eyes. Again, it seemed like later it would come out, it seemed like they were controlling her eyes, but they were like, you do not want to open your eyes for this next part. Again, terrifying to hear.
Not reassuring, yeah.
And the apparatus began to vibrate, and it was pumped full of a warm, watery like substance, which I think that's a quote, but we could just call it liquid. I think watery like substance is just liquid. And Betty was freaking out. She's like, I'm gonna drown in here. And the beings are like, you're gonna be fine, you'll be okay, we're gonna make sure you can breathe. And this stuff starts filling up this little sealed up plastic throne she's in. And suddenly, Betty's like, oh shit, this feels good.
Oh,
it's soothing. It's relaxing. Oh, it feels good. It's like a whirlpool vibrating sound. And I can breathe all right because I'm breathing through my mouth and through my nose through those tubes.
Wow. It's like being back in the womb, kind of,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Very womb-like.
Next, the beings pumped a sweet, syrupy substance through her mouth tube, telling her that it was important for her to swallow it. Betty said the experience was relaxing and that the syrup, just about a spoonful in total, tasted really good. And it didn't even make her stomach upset, which pancake syrup had a tendency to do. So she was... happy. She was a steak person, not a food person.
All right.
Well, it could be worse. I mean,
that mouth tube.
Yeah. She's feeling
vibing
good.
up in the watery-like substance.
Yeah,
she was
be
like,
worse.
Again, with each turn, she's like sending the thought, what is this going to do? What is this going to do? And they're like, you're going to be all right.
You're going to like this.
Yeah. And
Just
she was
make
like,
sure to swallow.
She's like, this part's great. After some time in the immersion chair, the vibration ceased and the fluid drained out of the apparatus. The beings returned and Betty was allowed to open her eyes. The 2 grays standing before her now had a single black cloth draped over each of their heads.
Nope. No thanks.
So
that's the first thing you see after going through that. Like, what the fuck are the... What is going on?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, boy.
Betty was ushered out of the apparatus and placed over the track once again. And remember now, we talked about last week, single file, everybody. There's always a gray in front and a gray behind her. And once again, like I said, arranged in single file, and the unlikely trio floated along the track to the opposite end of the cylindrical hallway of the chairs into another dark tunnel. As they passed through this new tunnel system, Betty remarked how the black cloths over the being's head in front of her, or the black cloth, I should say, in front of her blended in with the surrounding darkness, making it almost appear headless. The walls surrounding Betty looked like stone that had been chipped away, not unlike how one might picture a coal mine. So these hoods, not sure what they're for at this point.
Yeah.
They might be some sort of atmospheric deterrent, which we'll get into shortly. But this idea of them suddenly having these like missing heads as they're going through is really weird. It feels very theatrical. It almost feels like, Bryce, I'm sure you're thinking of this word. It almost feels like some type of initiation is taking place.
Yeah, that's pretty strange. Yeah, that's interesting.
This occult, it almost feels ritualistic, putting the occult hood over their heads.
Yeah, sort of a death rebirth type thing, you know?
And I gotta ask, are they underground? Are they even in outer space? Like this, or like this idea of like, is it possible that this ship has gone somewhere deep within the earth and this is where this is happening? And Betty's investigators had the same question for her. And later she was like, she said, my feelings were that I was not on the earth, but I was also inside the earth at the same time. And she kept going, I don't know how that makes sense. And the guys were like, well, maybe it's sort of like a hidden pocket dimension inside of our earth somewhere, you know?
Yeah, or another idea could be, you know, and this kind of came from John Mack's book. He had this idea that, you know, perhaps these beings have this capability to abduct one's consciousness, you know? So as opposed to like the actual physical body, they can take your consciousness, and then at that point you would feel like you're not on this earth, but you're still in this earth. You know what I mean?
I agree. And there's going to be some hints in this that might be the case. And also that would explain, I think, like, let's even like crystallize it a little bit more and say that they abduct your astral form, right?
Sure. Same thing.
Right.
Yep.
Your spirit, you know, or for lack of a better term, then that could also explain for some of the dreamlike qualities that take place and are about to take place as we're going to get into. Right. But I kept, when I was researching this part, I kept thinking about too how all the Celtic fairy stuff talks about the fairies living in a realm under a hill or under a mound or underground. And when you would go into the fairy realm, you would go under the earth. And there they would feed you. You would take, you know, you were supposed to not eat the food they gave you. And here we have an example of them making her eat this sweet, almost fairy-like sweet substance, you know?
Yeah.
So this is all firing off things that we've talked about over the past 240 episodes.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting too to wonder, so if it is like they're abducting a consciousness, but then there's so much emphasis on doing tests on her physical body, and then so you wonder like what's the like if you have someone's true sort of the root of their consciousness, can you also project the physical body that consciousness resides in? Like it's just kind of an interesting thing to think about those lines there.
I mean,
I think so. I mean, in that sort of lucid dream state, you certainly have you know, the ability to fly and feel ethereal, but at the same time, if you look down at your body, you can see it, you can feel it. Sometimes when you even feel like other people or other things or other people, I've done that. You know, it feels real. You know what I mean? So you could feel like you're being operated on and have all those sort of visceral, tactile sensations that you would get from, you know, like an operation.
Right. And that would imply that your consciousness has like an awareness on some level of like every cell in your body. You know, because if it's abducted, then they can see, you know, and do like a medical test on a physical body. It's like a cool thought.
I love that idea that every cell is conscious.
I think you guys are onto something, because we're going to get into this in a little bit. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but they talk about how the alien tech that's been on display for her is spiritual tech. It's of the spirit. And so it might be some sort of, again, remember last episode when they like replicated the Bible and passed it along to one another? This might be some sort of highly advanced virtual or augmented reality tech that is somehow tapped directly into the consciousness of the observer or abductee. So maybe that's how they gain access to our physical world, is through the consciousness realm or the astral realm. And like Riley is saying, if they have an astral augmented copy of your body, maybe they can perform actual physical effects on your body that's back in your house, laying in your bed, or frozen in your living room.
Yep.
Perhaps they're not
Love
even
this.
in the house with you. They're just
Right.
augmented projections, and she's not even seeing them until she's all the way in the ship or in this tunnel, or maybe she's never fully seeing what these things look like at all. You know, they're all just some sort of holographic projection of some kind. You know, I mean, I'm throwing around a lot of different tech here, but but that to me makes a lot of sense, and it also makes sense on a technological scale. If we were to go 2,000 years, 4,000 years in the past and show them our fucking phones and had the ability to use them in the past, which we really wouldn't, they'd be like, look at this magic mirror thing that is like bringing up, they would only be able to describe it in terms that they had context for, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So, where were we? As they passed through this new tunnel system, Betty remarked, about how their heads disappeared. Throughout this whole entire experience, Betty felt her body weighed down and out of her control. The track started up an incline, heading towards a glass mirror-like wall. At first, Betty thought that they were going to collide directly into the wall, but was surprised that they passed easily through its silvery surface into an altogether alien realm. Now, by this point, I think it's safe to say that wherever Betty was, she was no longer inside the craft. This is like beyond. Now she found herself quite literally through the looking glass in a very strange world. Betty described this place as having an atmosphere which vibrated with the color red. And this thing, the red was just everywhere. It permeated everything. And the even the black cloth on the heads of the aliens still looked dark, but there was like a glint of the red in it, and it reflected off of their silver jumpsuits. Everything was red except for the track, which they still glided along, hovering just above its surface. So this track is running through this, like this moving sidewalk is going through these realms. Betty could see buildings. Square buildings with openings, circular openings, which appear to have the texture of stucco or cement. There was no vegetation in sight, just a desolate red atmosphere composed of barren land and buildings. So this is kind of like Mars in the movies, or the scene in Blade Runner 2049 where Gosling goes to Vegas. Like, this is a very sci-fi atmosphere. But remember, this is all like late 60s, this all happened in the late 60s. The hypnotic sessions happening in the late 70s. Not a ton of modern. This wouldn't necessarily be like a modern, like Star Wars. She's probably not even seen Star Wars yet. It's like Star Wars just came out. So, unlikely.
I mean, this whole thing is so surreal. Like going through the giant mirror into this like red world. It's not just red. It's vibrating red.
Yep.
It's very trippy.
And she said it was kind of like a thick, foggy, misty red color, but everything, it's like that's what the sky was. She can't see a horizon. It's just no vegetables, no vegetation, no vegetables. Just this barren landscape. So now we arrive, fellas, at my favorite part of the whole story, the alien monkey creatures.
Okay. All right.
Betty, they start to pass through an area that is surrounded by tiny little, like 1 to 2 foot tall creatures. They are horrified that these buildings are crawling with these monkey creatures that have no heads, just 2 stalks growing out of their shoulders with big black eyes on the end of each stalk.
Oh my God.
Nightmare.
These beings they got 2 eyeballs, and there are loads of them. Oh, they are scary. And they've got skinny arms and legs and kind of a full body, and their eyes can move every which way. And they can climb just like little monkeys. Ugh, they're all over the place.
As they passed through the swarm of googly-eyed monkey creatures, Betty asked her hosts what they were, but her questions went unanswered. The alien monkeys simply watched as Betty floated past, and a relief rushed through her when her crew moved through them unharmed. Now, I know later in the book you get an explanation for what these things are.
Oh, really?
And I thought I might tell you here, but I think I'm going to save it for a little bit later.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
But
just building that tension.
do either of you guys want to give a guess as to what these things are? And I'll show you a picture from the book. And again, I hope you're following our Instagram at Bigfoot Collectors Club, because I'm going to post some of these.
Any
These
answer would make sense anyway.
Well, you'll
obviously.
be surprised. So this is what they look like. You can see this. And these were all of Betty's. She was a good artist. These were her eyewitness drawings. Look at these little things.
Whoa.
They're like
Are they like
sea
little
monkeys.
androids? They do look like sea monkeys.
Yeah, they're kind of like little froggy monkey things. Take a look at them. Androids, that's a good guess.
Yeah, like little worker
right?
drones.
Might be right. Bryce, do you have any guess what the monkey creatures are?
Not a clue. Just more nightmare fuel.
Great. So as they passed through the swarm of googly-eyed monkey creatures, they came upon a circular green membrane that led them into a new realm. They passed through this like thick, circular, another kind of wall or mirror that Betty went on to describe as a force field. And she thought that this force field might be separating these two areas. There was the red area we were just in, and then they come into a green area. The air is filled with the color green.
You know, I'm just thinking, like, this is why people don't talk about this shit, right?
Yes.
Vibrating red mists, little monkey people, headless hallways. You're like, okay. I'm not even going to fucking try to explain this to my children.
Don't think that I didn't think that we were going to get to this point and people are going to be like turning off this episode. But this is what we're talking about with high strangeness. This is like, this is what we're actually fucking talking about. Once they crossed through into this green area, the Greys removed the black hoods from their heads and continued along the track with their heads exposed. And this made her go, maybe the black was to protect them from whatever was in the red area. Didn't give it to her, but maybe the Greys were like, we can't be here.
Right.
Now I have another theory that we'll talk about later. As for Betty, she found no discomfort in the environment beyond what she was seeing. She could easily breathe in the atmosphere, and the track ascended into the green sky, and Betty's breath was taken away by how beautiful this new landscape was.
It's beautiful here. Oh, it's so beautiful here. And we're still along the thing, and now that we are in the green atmosphere, they are taking off those black hoods and going along, and it seems like mist or sea or something off to the side there. It's beautiful. And we're like on a narrow passage of land, and we're gliding across it, and off to the side I see, I don't know if they are fish or what. It looks like a combination of fish and bird, and it seems like it's haze all over and fog, and yet it's so light I can see it. And we are going someplace. I don't know where it is up ahead, but it seems that we are going someplace.
The track guiding Betty and the beings coasted up into the sky. Betty could see the glimmer of a city appearing off in the distance. Suddenly, they came to a halt as the track paused for a large white birdfish that swooped across their path. Riley needed to give it a good
Yes, the alien birdfish call, of course. I know exactly what that sounds like.
The procession restarted, and Betty looked down to see a pyramid-like building below. And she described it as being not a three-sided pyramid, but the structure did come up to a point. but it was almost as if you laid out a star and built a pyramid from the base of a star. So a
Cool.
jagged,
I feel you.
you know, it's not technically a pyramid, but you know what I'm saying? So in your mind's eye, build that, right? Now, cut it from the tip down, just the tip down. And so there's a flushed half where like this, the part that you cut away would be, and then a remaining part that just has like 2 or 3 prongs of the star sticking out, right?
Cool. Yeah.
So she sees this, and then at the very point of that, she sees a head that's sort of a human-like sculpture head that she said was sort of like the Sphinx, but it had 11 cheeks. And she kept getting the impression, look, I mean, this is like a fucking H.R. Giger. This is like out of like Jodorowsky's Dune, right?
Uh-huh.
She sees, they're like, what is it? What is it? She's like, she kept going that this thing had the face, the head looked to be both male and female. So gender, it turns out, is literally a construct, guys.
Proven by Glasgow.
Yeah, it's not. She's like, it's not the Sphinx. It's not a man. It's not a woman. It's both. She kept saying it's both male and female.
She's like, that's how she's inside David Bowie's head right now.
Yes.
Seriously.
Beyond that star pyramid, off in the distance, Betty could see a big city with tall buildings and domes connected by bridges against the green sky. It looked like something straight from the artwork off a 1970s science fiction paperback. And that's how she was like, this is like, I'm seeing science fiction-y stuff here.
So cool.
Soon, Betty came upon a glittering, hovering, crystalline structure.
And I'm coming before a light, a bright light, crystals, bright, bright light, and clear crystals that have rainbows all in it. It is all crystal all around, all forms of crystals. I don't know what it is. I'm afraid. I want to go back. And the bright light up ahead. Oh, I want to go back. Oh, they're taking me through these crystals. That bright light is up ahead. Oh, that bright light. We're stopping, and the 2 beings are getting off the thing, and I'm just there, before the light.
Inside the prism structure, the Greys having now left her side, Betty was brought before a large, illuminated bird. Now,
Of course,
yeah. But before we say, hey, this is getting really off the rails, remember, if you will, last episode, when the beings first appeared in her house, they were wearing navy blue uniforms with like bright blue highlights. Mm-hmm. And on their shoulders was an insignia. Do either of you remember what the insignia was on the shoulder?
It was a phoenix, wasn't it? It was like
a bird. Yeah,
Yep.
It was like a yellow bird on their shoulder patch, right?
Amazing. Cool.
So the
Quasga Order of the Phoenix.
Yes. Yes.
The massive bird stood there with its wings spread, radiating heat that was almost unbearable to Betty. She described the bird under hypnosis as an eagle, but like Riley said, it soon became clear that what Betty was standing before was a 15-foot tall mythological phoenix.
This rules so hard. Yes.
Yeah.
And here's how we know this. As Betty stood before it, the giant bird burst into flames, which grew so hot that Betty felt as if the flesh on her skin was melting off. She said this was the most painful part of the entire experience. Like she was like, it's too hot. I gotta get the fuck out of here. She didn't say that because she was a good Christian woman, but like she was like, it's like in Dune when Paul Atreides puts his hand in the box and he feels the flesh melting off, but it's all just fear, right? And he takes his hand out and of the Gom Jabor, and it's like fine, it's all intact,
right?
And then in a flash, the phoenix bursts into a golden flames. The bird vanished, and it's punctuated with golden confetti sparks floating all around. And Betty was totally okay. And where the 15-foot bird once stood was now a small fire, and the sweet scent of burning incense hung in the air. And as the flames died down, Betty is looking at the ashes, and she starts to see the pile of ashes like bubbling up and squirming. And out of the ashes comes this large, fat worm slinking its way out of the remnants.
Yeah, I hope they're playing Slayer in the background. You know what I mean? Like,
dude, totally.
Suddenly, a voice spoke to Betty.
You have seen and you have heard. Do you understand?
No, I don't understand. I don't even understand what this all is or why I'm even here.
I have chosen you.
For what have you chosen me?
I have chosen you to show the world.
Are you God? Are you the Lord God?
I shall show you as your time goes by.
Okay, so reminder, Betty, fundamentalist Christian. And now we have this alien abduction that is quickly morphing into some sort of dreamlike religious experience. Even the symbology of the phoenix was once used by early Christians as a symbol of death and resurrection. And there are connections to, the connections to alchemy and the achievement of high states of being, and its connection to ancient Egyptian culture. So we're getting all of this, which I would argue.
I was going to even say, like, bringing someone before the maker too, like it's Saint Peter guarding the gates, the two alien beings like guiding you to the main thing, and then
that's really what that's how she's interpreting this experience. And if you remember, when the Greys showed up in her house last episode, she's like, okay, they must be angels, right?
Mm-hmm.
So listen to this. This is in the Andreasson affair. The Collier Encyclopedia adds that the phoenix figures prominently in early Christian art and literature as a symbol of immortality and resurrection. Sacred in ancient Egypt, the phoenix, which is always male and had a beautiful red and golden plumage, was fabled to live for 500 years or longer. At the end of that time, it built a nest from twigs of spice trees. Remember, there was the smell of incense in the air, to which it set fire. Both the bird and its nest were consumed in the flames, and out of the ashes a worm emerged, from which a new phoenix would emerge. That's the part that most of us don't know about. Most of us just think that Phoenix is born again out of the ashes. It first comes out as a worm.
I'd never heard that before. I didn't know that. That's very interesting.
Here she is witnessing it, or at least describing it under hypnosis. So even if we're going to pause here and say, okay, this shit didn't happen. This is something,
right?
The fact that she's even tapping into like deep Jungian archetypes that she was from all sources not aware of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's like a universal
remarkable
mythology that she's tapping into. Yeah.
That alone is pretty fucking cool.
Totally, yeah.
Betty went back and forth with the voice for a bit, trying to pull answers out of it, asking why she must wait to learn what this whole experience was about. With each question, and this is true, like I said, with every question, as she asked both to the Greys and the voice, Betty received vague answers that left room for interpretation. Finally, the voice told Betty that the time for answers to her questions would come, and that she must just have faith in that. Betty responded that what she had faith in was Jesus Christ. The voice then told her,
"We know, child. We know that you do, which is why you have been chosen. I am sending you back now. Fear not. Be of comfort. Your own fear makes you feel these things. I would never harm you. It is your fear that you draw to your body that causes you to feel these things. I can release you, But you must release yourself of that fear through my son.
Boom. Through my son.
okay.
Betty's like, all right, now we're talking something that I can relate to. So
Yeah,
believing
speaking her language.
But I also wonder too if son, it's interpreted in the transcript as S-O-N. It might also be S-U-N because the phoenix was also the symbol of sun gods, of which Jesus Christ is the sun god. He's a resurrection god, all these,
Right.
So
yeah.
again, all this stuff. So believing this to be a confirmation that this was in fact the voice of God, Betty started weeping and giving praise and thanks to him. And with that, an invisible force turned Betty back around, and she proceeded to retrace her path down that moving track, out into the crystalline structure where she was rejoined by the two alien grays in silver jumpsuits, back out across the green landscape with the city in the distance and the weird star pyramid with the 11-cheeked, non-gendered head, through the circular membrane dividing the two green and red zones, down into the red zone with the buildings and the bug-eyed alien monkey creatures, through the dark tunnel system, and finally back into the cylindrical room with the plastic chairs.
Jeez.
Betty was placed into her chair, where she was once again connected to the tubes, sealed up within the transparent hatch. She was fed another spoonful of sweet, syrupy, yummy goodness through the tube, and flushed with that pleasurable warm liquid surrounding her. After some time, the apparatus was drained. Betty was bathed in a purple light that emitted from the fixture positioned over the chair. So another maybe detoxing or cleansing thing, right?
Sounds like UV. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, I feel like
exactly.
Martin Scorsese could shoot the hell out of this scene. Like,
It's
Sure.
very cinematic, this whole thing.
like
It kind of sounds, it's like a Nine Inch Nails music video, this whole
Right,
sequence.
Dude, we got to get Ari Aster to do a fucking alien abduction movie. I feel like he would fucking crush this.
Yeah.
So one of the Greys came over and produced two glowing white orbs. One was a little bit larger than the other, and led Betty out of the room, back into the room, connecting the light bath pedestal from last episode and the retractable lightning hatch. There, Betty was was reunited with Quazga, who told her,
Child, you must forget for a while.
this part is also super creepy. Quazga stared into Betty's eyes, and she watched in wonder as one eye glowed white and Quazga's face began to morph. And she describes it looking like a bee. That there's something about the quality of him that she feels like she's staring at a large bee. Two deep creases formed in his brows, which gave the impressions of him having feelers or antennae like a bee, and his almond-shaped eyes formed large circles, one white, one black, as he stared deep into Betty's mind.
yeah, man. Don't be squishing those bugs out there, people.
He says he's going to give me formulas. And he says until man finds those and understands those, he will not give any others. He says my race won't believe me until much time has passed. Our time. They love the human race. They have come to help the human race. And unless man will accept, he will not be saved. He will not live. All things have been planned. Love is the greatest of all. They do not want to hurt anybody, but because of great love, they said, because of great love, they cannot let man continue in the footsteps he is going. It is better to lose some than lose all. They have technology that man could use. It is through the Spirit, but man will not search out that portion.
So,
Whoa.
Yeah.
like, a lot of hope and then a subtle threat of genocide if we don't get our shit together.
Yeah, it's pretty loaded in there in the subtext.
Yeah, and she was like, well, how come man won't accept this stuff? And Quazga was like, because Man is too hung up on duality, too hung up in the physical realm, not thinking about love, not thinking about spirituality. Like, man, and they keep saying throughout this stuff and later, in other sessions she did later, this message of like the aliens trying to tell human beings, guys, it's really simple. All the answers you need. It's so simple. It's just love. Just go towards that. Go towards love. That's all you fucking need to do. And the message is, if you guys can set aside all of this bullshit, all this duality, all this binary thought, all this war, all this violence, and just go towards love and acceptance, that's the key to being accepted into this higher universal community. That's basically what this message is that keeps coming through.
I love that. The universal wisdom is just be chill.
And if you're going to turn into war-raging nuke monsters, we're going to take you out so you can't spread this to other corners of the universe.
Right, then you can't come to the alien hippie interdimensional Phoenix God party. Yeah.
Well, this is the way. This is the Western way. We are entranced by our technology, and we have left spirit behind. You know, there's still a lot of indigenous cultures that have held on to it, but you know, for the most part, you know, Western civilization seems to be running amok with these ideas that there is no spirit, that consciousness is an epiphenomenon created by the brain alone, and we're all just living in a materialist world. And I could see us going down the wrong escalator. You know, it's like, yeah, it's wild, man. If, you know, look, reading those John Mack books, Passport to Cosmos, and I haven't read Abduction, just bits and pieces. They all have the same elements, all of them. Every abduction case, we're screwing with the planet. There's always a spiritual element to it. And, you know, and it says there's always a message of hope, you know, but we're close. We're at the precipice, you know, and
we're pushing it.
We're pushing it, you know. And it's interesting.
I mean, it really is. It's this, I don't know, this sort of idea of like a holistic technology or, you know, that almost that, you know, like, nature is a technology, or technology comes from nature, and we've sort of gone in a different path and gone against nature, but maybe like the true kind of wisdom is using our technology to like you said, like just like love and harmonize and be chill, basically. Yeah.
So Betty believed that Quazga was locking hidden knowledge within her mind, along with the secret that they, the Greys, were going to come to Earth one day. Finally, he let go of Betty's mind and told her,
"Go, child, and rest."
A door opened and Betty was led out of the craft directly back out into the backyard of her own.
Take a mental health Monday.
Call into work and take a sick day. You're going to need it. It was still nighttime and it was still foggy. The Greys, still dressed in their silver jumpsuits, guided Betty back into her house, cradling the glowing white orbs the whole time. Once they re-entered the house, Betty saw that her dad, Wayno Ahu, was still frozen in the kitchen. Now, I also want to apologize for not being able to remember the term Scandinavian last week. That's how full of garbage my brain is right now. Her parents are Scandinavian.
Yep.
He was still frozen in the kitchen pantry, and her mother and the children were still frozen in place in the living room. Using the glowing orbs as some kind of remote control, the Greys guided Betty's family members one by one down the hall and into their bedrooms, awakening them from their suspended animation, but still keeping them in a daze. The beings told Betty that her children and her parents had not been harmed while she was away, and that they were going to put her to rest. They also told her that they were leaving the blue book. Remember the thin blue book that Quazga gave her? They were going to leave that. They were going to leave it with her in her possession for the next few days. Or actually, I think they said for some time.
It's Quazka's screenplay. He's like, just when you get to it.
It's like, whenever you get around to it.
Just if you could send some notes.
It will automatically delete itself after a week and a half, so I'll know if you read it or not.
Right, yeah.
Betty turned to one of the beings and said,
What is your name?
Joe Hop.
Joe Hop? What is this all about?
You will see as time goes by.
And what about that blue book there? Is that for me?
It is given to you for a while to grasp as much as you might grasp from it. There is writing there that will be discerned only through the Spirit, and it is the writing of light. It can be understood only through the Spirit. The other writing upon that it is for man to seek and find out. There are formulas, riddles, and poems, and writings, for man to understand nature, for he too is nature. He is formed from love, and love is the answer for man.
Using the glowing orb, Joe Hop floated Betty back to her bedroom and placed her in her bed. Almost immediately, Betty succumbed to a sweet, heavy slumber. At long last, Betty's experience had come to an end. The next morning, Betty woke to find the rest of the family already stirring and making breakfast. Neither Betty nor her eldest daughter Becky, who also participated in the investigation, remembered much about the events of the previous night, at least not at first, nor did they remember going to bed. They all sort of accepted it and seemed to just have a vague sense of something entering the house the previous night. They're not sure what. Now, she did remember the pulsating light and in the backyard coming through the kitchen windows. And in the coming months, she noticed how the grass on the hillside behind her home had died in a particular spot and would not grow back. A few years later, memories of the beings and the Grays and Quazka started to slowly come back to her. And that was when she was like, I need to reach out to J. Allen Hynek and find out what the fuck is going on with me, because over time, these repressed memories were coming back to her. Her father, Wayno, also had vague memories of the beings. When she eventually tried speaking about it to her parents, both of them said they did not want to discuss it. They didn't want to talk about the possibilities of being visited by alien creatures because that was in the realm of the occult and something they avoided altogether as faithful Christians. And in fact, she told her mom that a UFO man wanted to talk to them, and her mom was like, I don't want a UFO man here. She thought she meant a literal man from a UFO, and she meant a UFO investigator.
Oh, that's great.
But what about that blue book? Well, under hypnosis, after this story was recounted, Fowler and the Edelstein and the investigators wanted to find out, wait a minute, you said that we heard that this blue book was left here. And while Betty had no conscious memories of reading the blue book, under hypnosis, she revealed to Dr. Edelstein and the investigators that about 3 days after the event, Becky came to her daughter, and told her that she was having strange dreams about funny little men coming into their home. Betty shushed her daughter and brought her into her bedroom where she had hidden the blue book. And they looked through this thing together. And Betty had been like, over the week after, like going to the book, looking through it, almost like the family would leave and she'd scurry over and like get the book out and look at it. And she has no memories of doing this.
Love that.
Whoa.
And the book, again, under hypnosis, she's like, it's got all these strange symbols. It's got all these weird hieroglyphs. And they really were like unable to glean any real meaning from it. And then one day it was just gone. And the investigators were like, well, they did say that they were going to leave it for a while. It wasn't going to be there forever. And she's like, that's true. And then this is a story for another time, perhaps. But during the hypnosis regressions, when they were trying to get more information about the book, they felt an alien gray presence drop in through Betty in the session and basically cock block the investigators from finding anything else out about the book or Betty's experience.
Trippy.
Betty was like,
Wow.
"Oh, they're here, and they're listening, and they want to talk to you guys." Really, really, and it was basically like, "I'm not telling you anything. I'm not telling you anything. I'm not telling you anything." It was
Wow.
really, really weird.
We have already optioned that book.
Yeah.
Please do not proceed further. You will be in contact with our lawyers.
That, dear listeners, is The Abduction of Betty Andreasson, an odyssey like no other we've told on BCC. There are, like I said, a few dangling threads and theories and more experiences that happened to Betty after this. She married a man. She got divorced. She married a guy who also had alien experiences, and the two of them would go on to be abducted again together. And I'm considering unpacking some of those episodes, or Betty's episodes, not multiple episodes for us, but I'm thinking about going over some of that material in a Coda episode.
Oh, I'd be interested in that. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe next week over on the other side. But for now, I just want to turn to you boys. And Riley, we tend to throw this back to you first. I got to ask you, what the hell was that?
I mean, well, first of all, just a cinematic visual splendor, like this world that she went through. Like, I feel like I can see it so vividly in my head. Very, very well told. But I am left. What are the tiny monkey bug-eyed things? You
Thank
teased
you.
that you knew what those are, and I'm dying to hear an
I'm
explanation.
glad you asked me. Well, I can't remember exactly which session it came out in, but Betty eventually learned, I think on the way out, she found out that those monkeys were basically some sort of engineered beings that grew the black eyes that were replacements for the alien grays. That's where they got their eyes. That they were basically just organ donors for the
Whoa.
grays. So
What? That is okay.
that was
They're
their
little.
purpose.
Oh, that's
Which
never
It's
would
like
have
a,
gotten
like
there.
a sunglass hut.
Yeah. An alien sunglass hut. Exactly. And that makes me think, again, going back to our Roswell 3-part series, that these grays are some kind of bioengineered entities created by some other higher intelligence that are built specifically to pilot these ships, run these. Maybe they are some sort of spiritual tech that is designed to drop. They are our Mars probes, right? They're the probes coming. They are the probes, they are the things that are coming down here to collect information on humans, but they are some sort of biotech thing. And maybe it makes me think, the thought I had was, maybe they're covering those black hoods over their heads because they don't want the alien monkeys to see that they have their eyes in their head.
Oh, don't worry about these. These I had these already.
Yeah.
God.
But this idea that it's like bioengineered tech too. They're like growing little creatures to harvest their eyes, and like,
Which is what we do. We would
do
do
that
this
for organs. Yeah.
We're heading there now.
For
We're
sure.
all like
Pig's
lab
heart.
grown meat.
Yep,
Lab grown
pig's
meat
eyes.
is about to hit the market. You know what I mean?
yeah,
That is going to become a viable thing, like cloned, perfectly healthy, creepy in its. But is it any more creepy than fucking the nightmare factories of killing all these animals in mass production to eat them?
say less. Yeah,
we are going to see in the next 20 years how all this stuff is going to start coming into like the commercial marketplace.
Or even like designer organs that can be grown for you to like replace your heart or your lungs, or that doesn't seem that far off.
They'll grow you like a better pair of ears or a better nose or whatever you want.
You could get like Gucci ears to like replace your
it's
your
all
little
coming.
elf point on them. Yeah,
it's absolutely like that. Is like body augmentation is already happening, and it's just, and there will get to a point. I'm reading a book series now, the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown, and like it takes place in the future, and in the future, like they have mermaids, like they bioengineer mermaids, they bioengineer mythological creatures now. There's like griffins that you can ride around because they're like, we just make that shit now. We know how to like fuck with DNA and make it. So I think that shit's coming. Like it may
I'm
not
ready
be
for it.
in
Bring
our
it on.
lifetime, but
Let's do it. Let's do nightmare
it's gonna-
sci-fi future.
It's gonna get weird. It's gonna get weird.
Man,
Bring it on. Yeah.
man, you know,
All
there's a great line in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which I recently watched, and it's at the moment at the end when the ship lands and the alien creatures are there, and they sort of, you know, the U.S. government had set aside these couple men and women that were going to actually go on board the spaceship, you know, the people with the quote unquote the right stuff. But as the aliens walk by, they really only invite Richard Dreyfuss's character Roy Neary aboard because he was invited, you know. And Francis Truffaut, who played Claude Lacombe, he looks over to Richard and he says,
Jacques Vallée.
and he's based on Jacques Vallée. That's right. He looks over to him and he says, "I envy you. I envy you." And, you know, if you think about it, it's like there's something in common with all these abductees. It can't just be random because what seems to be happening, and it's something very real that's happening. This isn't just, you know, psycho trauma. This is an actual thing that's taking place. Whether it's on another dimension or not, nobody's for sure will ever know. But you know, these people are having an insane opportunity to sort of glance at, meet with, have communion with possibly our creator, you know, or something of a higher intelligence, you know, and it's such an incredible opportunity, man. And I don't know, it's so strange. I don't know what to make of it all, but it certainly is a real thing. And yeah, I don't know.
What do you guys think? Also, Bryce, real quick on
Well
Close
said.
Encounters.
Like that.
Did you catch J. Allen Hynek's cameo?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He's there, yeah.
Pops
at the
right
end.
up in there. Yeah.
What do you guys think about the religious aspects of this? There was debate about this in the book. The investigators were going, was this a direct message from a Christian god, or was this the aliens using a motif of Christianity to get through to Betty?
I mean, I feel like it's like similar to what we've talked about before, where that's the lens that her mind filters this through. So it's like for her, who's like a very Christian person, this comes across as like a very psychedelic religious experience, you know. But like, it's kind of like to what Bryce is saying is like whatever the like source of this is probably so far beyond human comprehension that this is the way that her mind is able to process it. That's kind of how I see it.
Well, and that's one word that a lot of these abductees use, the source and the creative source, whatever it is. These alien grays seem to be emissaries to bring people to this source. There is a spiritual component to this thing, and you cannot deny that. In fact, I challenge you to go through any abductee case and not find sort of spiritual elements or motifs or spiritual lessons learned by the abductees who will say it themselves, you know? So something is happening here, whether we call it God, the source, our creator. There is a connection to that and the UFO abductee phenomenon.
Yeah, I think it was either Calvin Parker or Charles Hickson who really started to frame what had happened to them as some sort of religious experience as well, you know.
Right, which gets you to this chicken and egg thing where it's like, is the root of all human religion like whatever this thing is, like whatever it's coming from here?
Well, and, and she keeps,
absolutely.
and two, I would say in this particular case, she's the one who keeps bringing up God. They don't really bring up God until she's like, you know what I mean?
Right.
And it almost sounds like the voice is like, yes, we know. That's why, like, you are a spiritual person, and that's why we're trying to contact you, because you might listen to us, because there are a lot of atheists out there who if there was a god trying to talk to them, might say, oh, I just had a fucking bad dream. So why not go to the religious people who would be open to these experiences?
Well, and
you know?
the light.
Yeah, people of faith, people who believe.
Yeah. And there's
Even
always
if
that
it's
element
not
of
the
light,
literal
too.
version. And, you know.
Yeah, the light element, too, is very tied to religious experience and
Yeah.
religious doctrine and dogma. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cleansing your light. It's crazy stuff. It's really wild stuff. We got to wrap it up. This has been a mega 2-parter. Again, there's still some stuff that we can unpack. We might do that over on the other side next week. But I want to thank everybody for listening to this 2-parter. Don't forget to click that follow button on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. So you never miss a single episode of BCC, especially when we're doing multi-parters like this one. We want to hear from you, so rate and review while you're there. If you drop us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, we might read it on the show like Riley's going to do for you right now.
This review is from Sonia Rogers. The best of the weird, a triumph of weirdness among my favorite audio companions. I'd give endless stars if I could. Highly recommended. Thank you, boys, and hello from Italy. 5 stars.
Nice.
Hello.
Right on.
Endless
Thank
stars.
you, Sonia.
Love that.
That's a great review.
Ooh, that's beautiful.
A triumph
Thank you.
of weirdness is just a delicious phrase.
Yeah, that could be
I
the name
love
of
it.
their next album.
Now, you know one thing one thing I know that our audience is going to love about this episode? There's a lot more Riley in this episode. You know, when we don't have a lot of guest action, we tend to have more room for Riley.
Quazga likes Riley.
Yeah, Quazga loves Riley. Quazgas love Riley. So if you want more Riley and you want more BCC, I recommend you check out our Patreon, BCC The Other Side, where there's a lot more Riley. There's a whole tier devoted to him. You can, at the very basic level, you can unlock 3 bonus episodes every month, plus our entire backlog of episodes over there. We are, I think, including Riley's Cosmic Tier, which just started about a year ago. We have like 258 or 59 drops over there. So guys, like, massive catalog, bigger than the current regular feed. So if you add it all up, we're starting to eclipse the regular show. So head over to patreon.com/BigfootCollectorsClub and check it out. And be sure to follow us on Instagram at BigfootCollectorsClub and on TikTok at BCCPod, and send in your personal paranormal stories to BigfootCollectorsClub@gmail.com. And I want to let all these kids know, guys, we want your real experiences, not your fun, spooky stories that are fictionalized. Those are great, but we want your true encounter stories. That's what the L files are for.
Yeah. No creepypasta.
No creepypasta. Well-written creepypasta, but we're getting
some
a lot
of it's
of
very
it.
good. It is very well written. I'll
But
give
we'll
that.
sniff
Maybe
it
we
out.
can
Knock it off.
we can devote. You know what? I'll say we might devote some Patreon episodes or future episodes to creepypasta, but we're looking for your real life encounter stories. Be sure to follow me on Instagram while you're over there at McMills. Bryce, Riley, what do you got?
Yeah, we're over on the socials. What you said it best, man. Hit us up on the other side, and thanks for leaving those reviews, man.
I just want to bring it back to the other side on the Patreon one more time, because I want to mention that the Discord that we've launched, that is a Patreon exclusive perk, is popping off. And like, we're having so much fun with it. We're loving what everyone's posting on there. All these new boards are developing. People are interacting. It's like, it's this whole other new ecosystem of the show. And joining the Patreon, even if you just join it for a month, that'll get you access to the Discord. So it's definitely worth checking out. And then on top of that, on the Cosmic Tier, just recently, I just dropped my second full-length album for the year. That is titled Midnight City, and it's this cyberpunk kind of love story about the birth of AI, as told through electronic music.
Great. It's really good. It's really good.
Man. I'm really trying to earn your dollars over there, you guys. So, and these things that I'm dropping are not on Spotify. They are not on Apple Music. They are only there, and I like it that way. It's really fun. So, if you want to come join us and check out what's happening, jump on the other side.
It's honestly the coolest Patreon as far as I'm concerned. Speaking of which, we're going to cross over to the other side for an impromptu out there discussion suggested by one of you listeners. If we don't see you over there, we'll see you next. We'll see you back here next week for an all new episode of BCC. Until then, good night.
And do what Betty Andreasson did and go get regressed.
Or don't, honestly, I don't know. Eyeball monkeys.
You don't want to meet the eyeball monkey Phoenix guy?
Bigfoot Collectors Club is produced by Riley Bray and Michael McMillan and scored and engineered by Riley Bray. Our theme song, Come Alone, is by Suneaters, courtesy of Lotuspool Records. Do us a favor and support the show and unlock 3 bonus episodes every month by becoming a member of our Patreon, BCC The Other Side, which can be found at patreon.com/BigfootCollectorsClub.